I figured I could meet some girls there. I walked into the house with my husband, expecting a simple gathering, but then Laura did something I had never seen her do in all the times that she, my husband, and I had hung out. She literally ran to him, happily wrapped her whole body around his arm, and dragged him off to the garden without even saying hello to me. My husband didn't come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink, where I was greeted by Laura's mother. She is a lovely person, and we had a nice talk about our own lives. She made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly uneventful until dinner. I sat down next to my husband, and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why, since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother, wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied with, because I want to sit next to him. I turned to my husband, looking for support, and he caught me totally off guard by nodding and telling me to move, saying I was being childish and making a scene over seating. At this point, I felt my blood boiling because it was so obvious what Laura was doing, and my husband was just going along with it. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and needed to go to the bathroom. Laura told me where it was, and I left the table, doing breathing exercises to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom, and he said I was being jealous and overreacting, so I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time, my husband and Laura were laughing, and it seemed like everything he said was funny to her. She kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, and commenting on how strong he had gotten. She would look at me smugly. The breaking point was when I put a bit of meat on my plate, and she said, "Are you really going to eat all of that?" I froze in embarrassment while my husband and she laughed at this supposed joke of hers. Her mother stood up for me, saying that was inappropriate and to treat guests with respect, but Laura ignored it. Laura is very pretty and slim and works out, so coming from her, it hurt a lot. I stood up from my chair, walked out the front door, and called my dad. I told him to pick me up, and that I would explain why in the car. When I got in the car, I broke down and told him everything. He said I was most likely overreacting, but the situation was very odd and that I was welcome to stay with him for the time being. I thanked him and went back to our house. While I was getting comfortable, my phone flooded with messages from my husband and Laura. I read the messages, and to my horror, my husband said I ruined the whole dinner and that he was going to stay there for the night. Then I read what Laura said, that I had ruined her night because of my P&E behavior. After researching that term, it only filled me with more anger because I realized that she was the definition of a pick-me girl. My husband came home around 5 p.m. from Laura's, and I immediately said that leaving your wife and staying at another woman's house was disgusting. He started shouting that I was overreacting again and that I needed to go to counseling for my jealousy issues. For about a month, my husband became more distant and cold, and I could feel that our argument had driven a wedge in our marriage. Things were definitely on a downward slope, and although we were not having arguments or anything of the sort, I could feel that things were very tense around the house. We barely spoke, and we definitely did not have intimacy. I had to deal with him running off to Laura's about once a week. I bit my tongue and held off, hoping this was just a rough patch in our marriage and hoping for a light at the end of the tunnel. That was until I got a message from Laura with a positive pregnancy result and a threat, saying we should get divorced because it's my husband's child. I completely froze and honestly had no idea how to react. My husband came home around 6 p.m. that day, threw his keys on the side, and went upstairs without saying anything to me. I thought this was rude, so I followed him and told him we needed to talk, but he said he was tired and needed to sleep. This made me angry because I was serious, and I was borderline crying at this point because I felt so neglected, but I managed to hold my tears in. I told him halfway up the stairs that I knew about him and Laura. I expected him to look like a deer caught in headlights, but to my surprise, he looked at me confused. I went on to explain what I knew, the text, and what it seemed like, and he ended up laughing in my face. This filled me with so much rage because I had had enough of being walked on. So, I pushed past him into our room, got a suitcase from under the bed, and started packing his stuff for him. He started shouting at me, saying really horrible things, but I didn't hear most of it since I was crying uncontrollably and busy ramming every item of clothing into the suitcase. "I'm going to divorce him now,"